Hi, friends. Happy fall. I don't think we've said that on a webinar yet, so happy fall. I'm here with Tom, and we're going to be talking about how to uplevel your regular decision applications. We're glad you're here. Happy November. And our check-in question is what's making you feel great these days? So far in the chat, we've got sleep, Squid Game, the challenge. That was mine. Movies. Yeah, if you feel like sharing, feel free to share in the chat. Tom, you want to introduce yourself in case folks, for the three people who haven't met you?
Uh, I'm sure it's more than three, but hello to the three and more. My name is Tom. I've been working here at College Essay Guide now for this is my fourth year working for CEG, as we call it. But prior to that, I worked in college admissions for several years, both in the admissions offices at Pomona College and Holy Cross. So 6 years there. I also used to work as a high school counselor at a private high school in Seattle, working with students applying to a wide range of mostly selective colleges and universities. So that's the experience that I bring to the table. If you have any questions about like behind the scenes admissions side of the desk, I'll be speaking a little bit about that and how supplemental essays in particular and how colleges really ask us to get at what they're really looking for as individual institutions to help you put together stronger applications to those. So that's why I'm here and happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here. And the way that Tom and I run these is like if I'm talking, Tom is in the Q&A answering questions, and if Tom is talking, I'm in the Q&A answering questions. So y'all can throw stuff into that chat box, and we usually get through a bunch of questions. We'll also have a big Q&A section at the end to make sure that we get to as many as we can. I want to say all, but it depends on how many people we have and how many questions come in. So here we are. Look at all these happy people raising papers in the air. They look that like they've been, I don't know. I suppose they've all just been accepted at college when colleges use paper. So here's what we're up to. This was from the bullet points in the webinar. If you're watching the recording, you can just freeze it because I'm not going to go through all these things. But basically, we're going to talk supplemental essays today, why they're important, how to save time, how you can get in and actually figure out what a school is looking for. We're going to talk about how do you zoom back and make sure your application is doing its job. And then we're going to get into a review of an actual application that a student submitted. Thank you, dear students who submitted this. And yeah, we'll talk to you about College Essay Guide does one-on-one support. If you're interested in that, we'll talk about that for a few minutes at the end as well. So for those of you who are, I don't know, maybe on a first time webinar here with us, what are supplemental essays? These are the ones that are separate from your personal statement that colleges look for. Okay, so that's what they're supplementing other parts of your application, like your personal statement or your activities list. Now, a fun fact, sometimes students think, well, they're not that important, but as you'll soon learn from Tom, they are in some cases more important even than your personal statement because colleges pick their supplemental essay prompts. The Common App picks the Common App prompts. So chances are they're connected to important priorities for the school. And we're going to get into like how to figure out what those are in just a little bit. The goal here is to really show a fit. They should be able to see you walking their halls and drinking their Jamba Juice. I don't know, whatever stuff they have on campus, like taking advantage of their resources, including Jamba Juice. And College Essay Guide, we put together a ton of supplemental essay guides. So we've got our crash courses, which we'll link to in the chat. Thanks, Ray. So if you haven't seen these guides yet, you should check them out because we've got lots of stuff on how to write these. We come up with specific what are the essays that you're looking for and how do you write those? And they're all free 99. So some of the most popular ones, some of you already know this, so I will go over this briefly, are things like the Why Us essay. Colleges want to know, hey, have you done your research? Are you going to be a fit here? If so, prove it. What have you got that's going to connect well with what we've got? And you're sort of like doing this puzzle piece thing. Another one that's really important is major. Some schools, in fact, they will admit by major. They will be like, oh, engineering, tell us all your engineering stuff. And, that can be a really important one for some schools. Others just want to know, hey, what's an important extracurricular activity? Like Georgetown asks that you've spent a lot of time on. Tell us more. How have you spent your time outside of the classroom? Some campuses are really interested in diversity in many different ways and community, and they will ask specifically, how will you contribute to the diversity on campus? Or they'll ask specifically, what's a community that you're a part of? And why has it been meaningful to you? And what is the role that you've played? The thing that I want to talk to you about next is how you can write what we call super essays, which is to say an essay that's going to work for multiple different prompts. Because, hey, if you're going to write about an extracurricular activity, chances are that extracurricular activity could maybe be like a community that you're a part of. So you could, rather than writing two separate essays, you could write one essay. And one of my favorite ways to do this, to track all of your essays, is through our essay tracker. So we'll put this link in the chat, but when you hit make a copy, it's going to make a copy of this in your Google Drive that no one but you will have access to, and it'll say copy of. So just put your name at the top. So like Ethan's copy of, whatever, your name is, put that at the top. And then our recommendation here is to go into the applications for whether it's on the Common App or the UC application, University of California. Put all your prompts here, put your word limit, name what kind of essay this is, because that's going to help you in just a minute, and just put these on one doc. Now, you'll see some prompts here. Some of these are from this year, some of these are from past years, so don't necessarily use these, double check them. But these are all really selective schools. I feel a little self-conscious about that. But once you've done that, you can go into this tracker and it shows you how to use this. Some tips here on how to use this. But once you've done this, you can start to look for overlapping potential. Now, here's what I mean by this. By the way, quick side note, go into the Common App. This is what the Common App looks like. And you'll find them in different places. Sometimes it'll be like in the questions section, or sometimes there's like a writing supplement section. So it's like different strokes for different college folks. And some will only pop up once you've like chosen your major. For more on this, Tom's got a whole guide to the Common App, which we will link also. Sorry, Ray, I'm gonna make you like hunt for that one. But Tom put together a really thorough Common App like walkthrough that shows you where to find some of these. But the main gist of this is, let's say you're applying to 8 to 10 schools that have, I don't know, maybe just one supplemental essay, but maybe five. MIT's got even more. I think MIT's got like 8 essays. That could mean like tons and tons of like dozens of essays. But if you can find prompts that overlap, it could save you a whole lot of time. So let's say, for instance, you've got an essay on a community and a separate one that's about tell us about something that's meaningful to you, and a separate essay that's like share a perspective you bring or experiences you've had to help us understand you better. You could totally write one essay that describes a community that is meaningful to you and that has led you to developing like a perspective that would help me understand you better. So if I was writing this essay today, I might tell you about the pickleball community and what is my place within it. And that has been meaningful to me because after the pandemic, I wanted more community and connection, especially meeting people that I'd never met before. And the perspective that it's helped me develop is I've become more aware of the ways that I'm competitive, and it's put me in relationship to my competitive side in a really powerful way. I'm not going to get into the details of that right now because then I would just be writing the essay in front of you and you get the idea. So you can see how one topic like pickleball could be something that could work for all three things. Maybe it's a summer internship that you had. Maybe you love to do theater, or there is I don't know, a little community like online gaming that you have. Any of these things could potentially be something that could become a super essay topic. I'll also say this, if you've got something, I'll just share my face for a second. If you've got something that's really impressive that you're like, man, I'm not really talking about this in my application, it could become a really great super essay topic. Let's say, for instance, you were kind of shy to put this in your personal statement because you're like, well, it's already in my activities list in a big way. Well, just because something's in your activities list doesn't mean that you shouldn't write about it. In fact, it could mean if you've got something that's like really cool and impressive, you could lean into it and give us some more context and tell us why that thing has been such a big part of your life. And you could do that through any one of these prompts. These are all prompts that can help you and help us understand why this thing, whatever it was such a big deal for you. Okay, I'll give you an example of how to make a common community more uncommon. So I'll just read this to you and then we'll analyze it. Growing up a football player afraid of contact. Uh-oh, a football essay? Really, Ethan? But wait, I've heard the phrase be a man more times than I've heard my dad say, I love you. Ooh, some vulnerability. And that's no coincidence. Society taught us to be that way. Trapped underneath my sweaty pads, I'm coached to be strong when I'm weak, tough when I'm in pain, cocky when I'm insecure. But that's not me. I'm a boy who collects stuffed polar bears and cuddles with them when I'm feeling down. I'd rather wander through a grocery store than spend time perusing a Home Depot. And by no means am I a handy man. I'm a softie who happens to throw a tight spiral. Now, the reason I love this is it's a common sport, football, but we're getting uncommon details and uncommon values that we wouldn't necessarily expect. Would you expect vulnerability from a football essay? Maybe not always. And if so, that's your own issue. But typically, when I read football essays, there isn't this kind of like, sort of like behind the scenes, here's the truth about who I am. And if you look back at some of these prompts, you know, tell us about something that's meaningful to you and why. There are several different things that I think in this essay could qualify as being the meaningful thing. It's definitely sharing a perspective that would help us understand this person better. Could this be a community? Maybe. I mean, it's not really about the football community itself, but maybe it's about his place within the community, right? So you see how this could kind of work for multiple prompts. So the purpose here, just to go back to the essay tracker, is to think, okay, well, what are some of these prompts that are repeating? What are the things that they're asking about again and again and again? So for instance, Brown's asking about a meaningful extracurricular commitment. Okay, could it be that I write something, certainly 100 words is pretty short, but overlaps with, let's see, let's see, Stanford's got one that asks about, what's an idea or experience that makes you genuinely excited about learning? Well, maybe the thing that makes you genuinely excited about learning, this intellectual experience, you write a 250-word essay on it and you shorten it and you make that the most meaningful extracurricular commitment if you feel like it's the same thing. Now, if they're separate things and you're like, okay, it's only 100 words, you could totally make that a separate thing. But this is the idea of this exercise, is to see what those overlaps are. Here, this is the rest of that essay. But sometime during my 13 seasons of football, I realized living in the weight room, hitting harder than your opponent, or leading a game-winning drive is not what makes you a good man. Rather, it's being human enough to stand up for those who can't walk, speak for those who don't have a voice, and admit the damages of a lifestyle that has enveloped you since you could walk. As I battle for the starting quarterback position this year, subtle flex, it's my turn to redefine the term that tried to define me, so that when the next generation of football players gets told to be a man, it means to use your heart, not just your helmet. I love that so much. Because to me, changing the narrative of how boys view masculinity matters. Now, this was written for a Stanford prompt, what matters to you and why. They don't use that prompt anymore. But that's why he edited that sentence, because it specifically spoke to the prompt. Now, for those of you who are like, what can I learn from this? First of all, making uncommon connections. What would someone say in the cliche football essay? Don't say those things. Like, what could you say that might be a little bit different? How do you make it uncommon in some particular way? The other thing I really like that he does is that he talks about he uses language specifically in the prompt. You don't have the prompt here, so you don't know that. But what matters to you and why was the prompt basically. And having language that's like, hey, this is like a bespoke essay for your prompt is, I think, a great thing to do in these supplemental essays. Tom, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about positive character attributes. Do you want to share screen or do you want me to? Will you actually, can
Sure.
I give you screen sharing so that I can
Yeah,
see?
yeah, I can share them.
Great. Great.
I think I may have just kicked you out. I don't know if that is true
Okay.
or not,
No,
but
you're good.
I think that's the case.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I'll jump into Q&A.
So awesome. So my section is a little bit about kind of, just zooming back a little bit and thinking about the audience for your supplemental essays, right? So this is part 2 of our 10 ways to uplevel your, essay and application webinar. Part 1 was last week. If you missed it, that's a great shout out for our YouTube channel. The recording's up there. We go through the activities list, the additional information section a little more in depth. So if those are the components of your application that you're still, wanting to level up and still unsure about or still working in progress, you'll definitely want to tune into part 1. But in part 2, we really wanted to kind of do this deeper overview of the supplemental essays, spend a little bit more time talking about what Ethan just shared, which is kind of like those pragmatic, what are they, what are colleges looking for in them? A great example of a super essay, right, which is the ones that ideally work for as many schools or as many supplemental essay prompts as possible using the tracker. But speaking from my admission officer perspective, I just wanted to talk a little bit about something that I found really helpful in working with students individually on their essays and applications, is thinking about utilizing and leveraging colleges, what we call these foundational documents, to help communicate your positive character attributes to those colleges and universities. Now, what do I mean by that? So colleges there's this big kind of survey that happens every year where the National Association for College Admission Counseling asks colleges, what are the most important parts of your admission process? And right below, grades, courses, essays is positive character attributes. Actually, positive character attributes is above that. We call these colloquially at College Essay Guide, we tried to give 5 qualities the majority of colleges that we looked into said they want to see in students. So Ray is going to put in the chat a link to our admission nutrients just so that you have those going forward. But in some, they are intellectual curiosity, service to others / community impact, leadership and or initiative, consistent engagement, and collaboration. Those are qualities that colleges like to see in students. But also colleges have individual things that are mentioned in their mission statements and strategic plans that are often tied to the way that the admission officers have to read the files. If you've ever looked at like videos where students have requested their admission files and the notes to be read by admission officers, a lot of times admission officers mirror language and kind of mention particular metrics or qualities that they want to see in students that are tied to their foundational documents, which are some of these things that you see here on the screen. So just like in the United States, foundational documents are kind of the things that are like known to people to be core tenets of what the United States represents. It's things like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Colleges have very similar kind of documents that are really meant to kind of illustrate not just who they were built to serve initially in their founding history. That would be like something like the founding charter, but also like the Bill of Rights that continually is evolving and being updated as there's new pressing, needs in society. You can add amendments to the Constitution, right? It's similar to colleges' strategic plans where they kind of talk about, okay, we have a founding charter, we have a mission statement that unites us as a campus, but we also continue to grow and try to bring in new qualities, new experiences, new perspectives to our campus to help make it bigger and better, right? So when thinking about your supplemental essays, I really, really want to encourage you, maybe even in your essay tracker that Ethan showed you, it's a good idea to look up the different colleges' mission statements. You can try to see if you can find their strategic plans as well, founding charters, because I will tell you, as an admission officer at Pomona, I actually had to look for valued qualities that were mentioned and cited in these documents and find evidence of them in students' applications. This is just to give you 2 examples of mission statements for 2 different colleges. One is a liberal arts college, Pitzer College here in Southern California, and the other is Yale University in Connecticut. And what you can see here is that some mission statements, I would say, are more distinctive than others. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to give you, the particular qualities that are really, really distinctive or unique for an individual school. Yale's, I would say, if you look on the right side, is a little more kind of general in terms of what they're looking for, but you can get a few nuggets of some things that they're paying, their wording and phrasing is particularly distinctive, right? So something like a free exchange of ideas is something that you kind of see mentioned towards the end of their mission statement. So in your supplemental essays, since Yale is saying this is something they value, can you show your positive character attributes, any ways that you have cultivated free exchange of ideas? Or a way that you kind of foster a sense of openness among your extracurriculars, among communities that you're a part of, your town, your city, country more largely, right? Pitzer colleges is a little more distinctive. They actually kind of give you some of their core values that are actually woven into their supplemental essays as well. So things like social justice, intercultural understanding, environmental sensitivity, participation in college governments, being an active member of a community. So it's not to say, looking up mission statements is going to give you everything that you need to know for an essay, supplemental essay, but someone was just asking in the Q&A, I don't know what I want to write about for my supplemental essays for different schools. This exercise can definitely be a good way to kind of show you, okay, I could write about a lot of different experiences for this particular essay about leadership, but is there a particular instance of leadership that aligns more with the values that this college is saying that they really prioritize, that are part of who they are, both historically as well as their future? So here are just a few other examples from different schools. Swarthmore College has some qualities they mention on their website and their mission statement in terms of what they look for. So you see things like civic engagement. Not every college is necessarily going to say that, but since Swarthmore is pointing that out, maybe that inspires some of the subject material that you put into your supplemental essays. Creative and proactive problem solving. Can you think about instances where you can speak to that quality in yourself? Bennington College, they're a little more of a, I'd say, they are not kind of as cut and dry with their qualities that they look for in students. So you can see this kind of in the way that they describe themselves: self-restraint, self-direction, aesthetic sensibility, right? Bennington is a little bit more on the Pitzer end of the spectrum, where unlike Yale, it's not quite as general in terms of what they're looking for. They really give you some clear specifics to help guide your material. MIT, I like really showcasing this one because everyone thinks about MIT and they think about like grind culture. But I really want to underscore that ability to prioritize balance point at the end. MIT really wants to see evidence of students who are able to, yes, work really hard and demonstrate initiative and risk-taking, and an intensity and enthusiasm for STEM. But can you also show evidence in your application that you are able to take a step back from that, to pause, to reflect, to recharge? They want some evidence of that in their student body, because people who kind of take care of themselves more holistically are able to create better innovations in STEM and support MIT's mission, right? This is also just a plug for strategic plans. So mission statements typically are rooted in the history of a school, who it was initially founded to serve, whether that's certain populations, certain qualities. I know, for example, Bates College, their history is a lot about, it was founded by abolitionists, and that spirit is still really present in the school's culture today. It's not just kind of lip service. Colleges really do oftentimes look for evidence of those qualities in applications. So strategic plans give you a sense more of that future direction, though. So this is an example of Georgia Tech's. They have their strategic plan that's the 6 focus areas. And they've also have recently rolled out something called Big Bets. There's 4 of them. So you see some of the qualities here on the screen: amplifying impact, championing innovation, connecting globally. Yes, on the surface, when you research the college website, those are a little general. But if you were to click a little bit deeper, and this is me basically saying it's really worth it to spend some time on the websites and pages of the actual colleges that you are interested in. This is probably one of the least prioritized steps in the writing process that I see students neglecting. Is, yes, you want to create super essays that can work for a lot of schools, and you also want to be really intentional with trying to calibrate those essays, mirroring language, sharing ideas that are consistent with the way a college describes themselves, to show a little bit more attention to detail, and that you really understand what that school is all about and how you can make a case for your mission and values alignment. Clicking a little bit deeper on the website is going to allow you to get to something like this bullet here. The Georgia Tech leadership says that they want to double the scale and amplify the impact of research. Okay, that's all well and good. But if you actually go and dig a little deeper into, some of the fine print, it's letting you know actually some of the areas that they are more interested in advancing and ramping up at their institution. So can you give some examples of research experiences or academic topics or exploration that you've done that relates to some of these things that they are telling you they want to increase and ramp up in terms of their impact in these areas: medical innovation, aerospace, AI, sustainability, right? Now, this is not to say choosing one of these is going to guarantee you admission, right? But it's definitely going to give you a whole lot more of a leg up and a well-researched application that's really aligned than a lot of students who just try to kind of do everything more generally, and not really get as nitty-gritty with what a particular college is saying that they value in students. So just to wrap up this section, and just to give yourself a little bit of a checklist when you're writing your supplemental essays, that's usually the last step after putting together your personal essay, your personal statement, your activities list, your additional info section. When you're looking at that whole application overall, all the components plus the supplemental essays, here are a few things to keep in mind. It's a great idea to do a value scan or a roles or identity scan. Another way to think of this is an application audit. Are there, as many of the admission nutrients that Ethan and I have mentioned present in your application, right? Am I communicating in these different essays a range of roles, values, identities, instead of particularly maybe rehashing one over multiple spaces? That variety and kind of thinking of your application as a book is definitely going to help you out in terms of having each space stand out. Balancing achievement and fulfillment. I think the super essay that Ethan shared before about the softy and the tight spiral, the football essay that's not really a football essay is a great example of this, because that student had lots of different accolades on his application, in his additional info section, and his activities list. And I imagine his recommenders shared a lot of information, particularly about his food justice recovery work. That was a big theme of his academic interest that he had done a lot of really amazing work with. But as you saw from this essay that he wrote, he's also kind of using some written spaces intentionally to show some sides beyond the trophies, beyond the awards, beyond the grades, and beyond the A+, because that does show, just like MIT likes to see a prioritization of balance, it is a good idea to kind of showcase things that are not necessarily all about winning and being the best at everything. Yes, colleges have lots of spaces for you to champion that, but there's also heart and vulnerability, and taking a step back from that really can make for a really well-rounded picture. I'd say writing consistency is another thing to keep in mind. So when you're looking at your quality between your personal essay and your supplemental essays, don't just leave the supplemental essays for the last minute, and your personal essays is like beautiful, tour de force of writing that is so well put together. Sometimes as an application reader, I would see a lot of discrepancy between the regular application looking amazing and the supplemental essays being, a lot of times I would write on my notes, looks like this was slapped together. You don't want that to be the case, right? So just try to invest equally into both sides and make sure the writing is equally consistent in how you speak and the way you communicate your ideas. And lastly, an application logline. This is a really kind of great exercise that we like to talk about at College Essay Guy, where it's all about kind of looking at your application as a whole. And is there kind of like a log line, like for a movie? It's basically kind of when you think about like you're surfing through Netflix and they have like the little descriptions under each title. You kind of want to think about that as your log line, right? What's like a 1-sentence summary of who I am, what I want this application to communicate, and do I feel like the application is communicating that really punchy, singular, bite-sized message? That's something that can really help you make sure it's doing its job. All right, Bo, we want to dive into an actual real deal application that was submitted. So Ethan's going to take over now and get rolling with it.
Sweet. Thanks. Before I do, I want to answer Sherry's question. Sherry says, how do you handle the question that's tell us about a significant academic challenge you face and the steps you've taken to overcome them? So that particular prompt, whether it's an essay or whether it's something that you're sharing about in the additional information section. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that section, you're going to write your personal statement, which is like 650-ish words, or less. You're going to have supplemental essays for selective schools. They'll be like separate pieces of writing. You've got your activities list, which is like your brag sheet. And then you've got your additional information section, which is like, what else do you want to talk about? Now, it sounds like for these schools, and it sounds like we're talking about University of Idaho. Okay, got it. By the way, so you're saying they're in the Common App, but I'm recommending for students to apply directly. Affordability is key. Yeah, that can work. And if you mean affordability in terms of like fees, like for applications, they can get fee waivers. Maybe Ray, if you wouldn't mind putting the fee waiver application or the fee waiver blog post that we have in there, that would be great. So how to handle this one? Briefly, in bullet points, I would do a couple bullet points on what are the challenges. And for some students who've experienced a lot of challenges, that's hard to do. But challenges, and then what are the effects of those challenges? What did you do about it? And what did you learn? And we've got a little exercise on this one called the feelings and needs exercise. Actually, rather than Google it, I'll let Ray share it. But we've got an exercise that'll help you sort of map through what are the challenges, effects, feelings, and needs. It takes about 10 minutes to map out. And I would just bullet point the answer to those questions, and that should give enough content for that particular essay. If, on the other hand, you're listening to this and you're like, I'm a student, I'm not writing that, but I have experienced challenges and I'm not going to put them in my personal statement, you could also put those in bullet points in your additional information section. Okay, to the essay. Here we go. Well, not just the essay, the whole application. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. So thank you to the dear student and all of you students who submitted. We're really grateful. Let's just do a breeze through of some of these elements. So the activities list is looking really solid, by the way. These are all going to be 150 characters. And if you'll notice, the students got it down to 149 characters. So I know they've done a lot of work. And you'll see that these early things here are related to music, violin, jazz group. Fine to group things if you want, but you don't have to. Notice that the first word in the description here is led. If you can show leadership through these, I think that's great. Look at this one here. Hosted leadership meetings, also showing leadership, which is great. These qualities like initiated a newsletter, also a great quality. Colleges are interested in leadership where you've taken initiative. The student has also been director of membership, which implies more leadership. They designed a particular mentorship program. And I like that there's like specifics. How many meetings were there? How many people were in the orchestra? Great. Visited some preschools in order to work with this organization. I just love the details here. The key here, I mentioned this last week, but strong verbs, developed the curriculum, doubled the attendance, arranged in-person meetups. Great. This is showing me a range of skills, qualities, values. One of 22 intern tellers selected to operate a branch in this particular credit union. Awesome. I like that it shows selectivity here. That's great. So generally, this is working really well. You can see they've done some fundraising stuff. They've got some more leadership stuff, even some summer writing work. Now, today we're not going to focus on the personal statement, but I just wanted to sort of give you a brief scan of it. This student was focused on particular their involvement with music. Now, being involved with music can be a tricky one because it's such a common topic. What I like about this student is writing about violin. Let me just scroll down here. But the word violin, if you look at this, appears relatively infrequently. So sometimes in a violin essay, it's going to be like it's all about the violin. But if you look at this one, two, three, four times it's mentioned, and really it's about the other experiences. And so the exercise for this one, if you Google values exercise and you're writing about a common instrument, sport, extracurricular, you can take a look at this and go, okay, how do I weave in some values that might be a little bit more unexpected for my particular thing? In this case, violin. And what you'll see, and sorry, I'm fast forwarding through this because I want to get to the supplements and focus on those today, is there are a range of values that are shown. If you're watching this, you might just like pause it and like kind of read it through on your own. But you'll see things like, improvisation as an act that they perform every day and teaching young kids violin lessons. Now, is teaching going to be like, wow, I've never heard of anybody teaching? No, it's not going to be like, but it's weaving together lots of different things, unlocking confidence, demonstrating how improv works. And then it shows how the student has done a little bit of teaching and like, sorry, like the word pedagogy comes in here. Let me just show you this. As working at this String Teachers Association National Conference, assisting this particular doctor, presenting a string jazz pedagogy to a room of classical players. So there's some nice different experiences that they've woven together, and you'll find in here some uncommon connections to values. So a nice job of making a common thing somewhat uncommon. Now, we're going to focus on the essays here for about 10 minutes or so. I'm going to read this essay. I'm going to have Tom tell you what he thinks. I'm going to tell you what I think. But I'll actually pause and I'm going to see what y'all think too. And if you feel like sharing your thoughts in the chat, that would be great. So tell us about a topic or idea that excites you and is related to one or more academic areas you selected above. Why are you drawn to it? Now, the key for this one is this student ready to come onto campus and do, in this case, Yale level work? That's what I'm looking for when I see something that excites you and is related to an academic area. So can you come in and take a Yale class and be great and totally do the work? Here's the essay. 50 years ago, people who protested the Vietnam War or civil rights issues looked young enough to need parental permission slips. Young people have been at the forefront of change in this country for decades. Yet, voter turnout among 18 to 24-year-olds in our last presidential election was significantly lower than in every other demographic. Last summer, I attended the International Leadership Foundation's Youth Leadership Academy, studying the pillars of American democracy, entrepreneurship, and innovation. For my capstone project, I addressed why funds should be restored to humanities education. Love the specifics there. My research revealed that empowering citizens with knowledge contributes to a functioning democracy, and educational attainment results in long-term civic engagement. As an Asian American Texan, I was disappointed that voter turnout for both demographics was second to last compared with other racial groups and states. This year, I'll turn 18 3 days before the Texas constitutional amendments election, and I'll join my parents on election day to exercise our freedom of political participation. Side note, I'm curious to know, you can let me know in the chat, do you feel like, as you read this, and I'm going to read the last paragraph in a second, is this a student who could do Yale level work? If so, why? Or what would you like to know more about? Finally, the student says, through Yale's political science major with a concentration in international relations, I'll turn my disappointment into motivation to create a better future for all of us. I'm excited to take an interdisciplinary approach to return fresh voices to politics. Tom, handing you the mic. What do you think? What do you think of this essay?
Yeah, I think this is a really effective essay at responding to the prompt. And really kind of, I mean, this is like a very classic, I'd say, why major essay, where, especially I think as you'll see from the rest of the application, there are more opportunities to pinpoint Yale specifics, particular courses, professors, etc., that the student may want to engage with. So I think using these 200 words to outline the way that she's engaged with political political science, international relations. The essay before also talks about an experience in Spain with the violin. So you have this kind of sense of intercultural understanding and global awareness from another application component, her personal essay. And as an application reader, now you're moving on to another essay. And instead of her talking all about, oh, in Spain, I did all this global awareness stuff with violin, da 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 da. She's spotlighting different things. So again, I think this is a really valuable lesson in kind of like having your application highlight different beats and points and skills, qualities, values, and interests. And I think the specifics that she's giving in here are really great. And it's not just about here's all the things I did, but there's also a really great kind of intro opening that gets a little bit more at kind of like the why behind why she really wants to do this work, referencing kind of periods in history that have really inspired her. And also, I don't know if you remember earlier, but one of the mission statements that I shared on the screen was Yale's. And one of their big things that they mentioned in their mission statement is free exchange of ideas. And this essay, I would say, is really kind of very, very directly. It happens to be a major interest of hers, so I think that works out in her favor. But this is really kind of directly leaning into that key part of what Yale says is valuable to them as an institution. So many wonderful specifics. I also love the weaving in of personal identity, being woven in and motivated into her work and having that be something that really is inspiring her. That's something that we're really big at College Essay Guy and thinking about your roles and identities. Many colleges ask students to talk about their lived experience in the world that they come from and how that's influenced their academic goals. So I think the student did a really great job doing that. Or that was like just a lot of praise, but it's a really strong response.
I think it's good too. Yeah, my 2 cents. And because I want to give y'all who are listening two other ways to write this essay if you're interested in it. So first of all, I'm going to just plus one some of the stuff that Tom said. I think that there are lots of different things that are covered in here. I would call this sort of like a sampler platter approach to this because this says what is a topic or idea. And I think the topic or idea is like voter turnout, in particular young voter turnout, is the topic or idea that excites them, that this is what they're interested in talking about. Now, what I like about this is the specifics in here where you can see that the student has gotten involved politically. And that to me, love these specifics. So I'm just going to make a little note here, love. I also appreciate like the sampler platter of like, here's this thing that I was involved with. And like Tom said, woven identity, and here's how I'm going to stay involved. And then at the end here, coming back to the major. Now, two other ways that you could approach this. And dear author, if you want to do one of these, great. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just going to give you some other ideas. I found myself reading this, wondering what the topic or idea was. And I had to get to the end of it to be like, oh, I think it's about voter turnout. So another way to do this potentially would be to clarify the topic or idea at the start. And I know that you're kind of setting up for it here, which works, but it could be that the idea is clarified at the start. So that's one way to go with it. Another option, sometimes students will do this, is you can just say, at Yale, I'm interested in a political science major with a concentration in international relations. So you put your thesis first and then say, and I'm particularly interested in young voter turnout. And then you get into it. So this student uses a thesis last approach, which is fine. If you want to put the thesis first, because you like that better, that can be fine too. I've also, side note, seen even in short essays, a thesis in the middle, which can also work. But the other option, so one option is like to just put the thesis at the start. The other option is if you wanted to just take a topic or idea and just dial in specifically on that, you could do that. So for instance, if this person wanted to dial in, what is the deal with young voter turnout and why are they so passionate about that? It's sort of covered here, but you could just zoom in totally on that and stay focused on it. That works. So it's sort of like sampler platter, like the appetizers platter with like the mozzarella sticks and the buffalo wings, etc. Or you could just be like, you know what, I'm just ordering one dish, and the one dish is the topic or idea, and you go deep on that. Okay. I do think it's important to do what this student did, which is to go ahead and name your major and the relevance to whatever it is you're discussing. Nice job, dear author. Here we go. Next essay. How have your interests, values, and experiences drawn you to Yale? All right. Now, the question here is like, of all the schools, thousands that are out there, what makes Yale special? What makes Yale particular? So what I'm looking for when I read this essay is like, okay, is Yale going to feel like you've really done your research? And that they are special among the schools, even the schools that you're applying to. All right, here we go. Seeking to mend the cracks in my Chinese American identity by creating cultural awareness for the next generation of Chinese students, I've been tutoring English and sharing American culture with kids from China every Friday since the pandemic. Wow, kudos to you, first of all. At World Wonders Bridge, we learned through swapping stories, from high school football to intense sports day rivalries. Now, I just want to pause and note we're halfway through the essay, and I don't yet know what experiences have drawn you to Yale. So I'm just naming that. At Yale, I'll continue my cultural advocacy through education. Okay, how? As a Dwight Hall public school intern. As students begin to discover their role in their community, I'll encourage them to look beyond themselves by starting a pen pal program between New Haven and schools around the world. Educating the next generation on cross-cultural connections is a tool that will transform our society. Small-scale interactions, when multiplied, ripple into waves of cultural competency. All right, Tom, what do you think? How is this essay doing in terms of giving us a sense of what draws the student to Yale?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a tough prompt. I really actually feel for students who have to do this because it's 125 words, and you're asked to reflect on your own interests, values, and experiences, and how those are bringing you to Yale. So I think it's understandably if you're stumbling upon this and you're like, I don't know how much of this to make it about me versus Yale. That's a tough call, right? And I think every student's going to approach this differently. Some might argue, maybe that it would be valuable to fold in Yale a little bit earlier, but I would actually maybe say that with a prompt that's this short, I think setting up the foundation for your interests, values, and experiences, which is what the first part of the prompt is asking, isn't actually all that. I think that's actually a wise idea. And for this student, we know a little bit about their Asian American identity influencing at least their interest in politics and kind of issues around voter turnout, for instance. But this is kind of folding in a different beat to that. Different, so people might be like, oh, it's a repetitive theme, but not quite, because it's kind of really hitting at different aspects or ways that they would engage in at Yale beyond purely the major or academic experience. I think something I'll be scanning for is if they do mention kind of some academic specifics, maybe in other places in the application, because I do think you want at least one essay to maybe do that, if you can, especially if it's a why us one.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Well,
jumping.
yeah, I'll jump in. My sense, to your last point, Tom, is that I would love to see more specifics related to Yale because as I read this, I don't get a strong sense of what makes Yale different from all the other schools that you're applying to. Because the things that I highlighted here, the Dwight Hall Public School intern, well, there's probably a public school near X institution that you could work at, and you could probably start a pen pal program at other schools as well. So as I look at this, I'm really hungry to know what are the particulars of
Yeah.
what sets Yale apart from, Michigan or, BU or whatever other school is. So my advice, dear author, would be to rethink this one, to go back to your research and be like, all right, what are the awesome things that Yale offers that I'm excited about? And you just make two lists, all the things that I've done, all the things Yale's got, and you kind of go, and then I would rewrite this one with more Yale specifics. I would try to 125 words. I'd try to include 3 Yale specifics in here. Ideally, these are things that don't exist somewhere else. So, all right, here we go. Last one. Tell us about your membership in a community to which you feel connected. Why is it meaningful to you? And you can define community however you like. To me, giving to my community means creating spaces where my peers feel supported, connected, and inspired to grow. Now, I love this. You're already defining what community means to you. This is my 4th year as part of the blank organization, the first Asian American youth business organization. Awesome. The opportunities this dynamic community has given me have grown alongside me as I advanced throughout high school. In sophomore year, what started as the first rehearsal of a new orchestral group soon became an opportunity to lead. On the first day, I took a chance, drawing on my prior orchestra experience to bring the group together. Understanding genuine leadership means ownership. I started investing my time in the orchestra, editing parts, selecting music, and assigning section leaders. Now, one of the things I notice, I'm going to, for the sake of time, fast forward to some of my notes, is that I noticed that some of the pieces of this are talking about what you did, and I find myself wanting to know a little bit more about what you learned from the experience. So it was a challenge to bring the members together across instruments. Everyone had their own playing style. I quickly learned the power of effective communication. So the second note that I'll make here, This is like what I did. You know, what did you learn? That's going to be important to me, I think, in this essay. Effective communication. So this could work because, yeah, effective communication is important. I want to ask you to come up with, is there an insight 2.0? In other words, is there something that might be like a more uncommon connection or value? Because while effective communication, I'm not going to say, you can't argue with that. Effective communication is important. Is there a particular way that you did it that might be different from someone else's application? Or is there a particular thing that you learned that might jump this out from anybody else who's working on bringing folks together? I gave precise feedback tailored to each person's strengths and weaknesses. Great that you did this, but some of the things I wonder about is like, okay, if we're going for Yale, are there sentences in here that might stand out from, like, could this have gone in somebody else's essay, for instance? Implemented group ideas through consistent effort, found ways to create harmony, nice play on words, and are working together. After 3 years, the orchestra now represents the entire organization at events like the City Arts Festival and the City Moon Festival. Nice example of impact. Love it. I'm just going to note that. Impact, yes. Okay. And then as a senior now, I began to recognize the deer in the headlights look. I wanted to find a way to support those students to create a welcoming environment. With my marketing and membership team, started a peer-to-peer buddy system. Both sides could practice mentorship skills, make connections across grades. Since then, I presented our monthly pitch at monthly meetings, created interest forms, and paired the pals. Okay. Again, awesome stuff that you did, but it's a little heavy on the what I did. What did you learn? That's what I'd be interested to know. And could you surprise us a little bit maybe with these insights here? Okay. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to just pause and say, Tom, anything else that you would say about this particular essay before we get into the rapid fire short answers take?
No, I mean, I definitely also want to be mindful of time too. But I think that the notes that you made are definitely ones that I would echo. And I think in general, this is actually a space where it's pretty generous for a college to give. I think it's 400 words that you have
Yeah.
to really reflect on this idea. And I like what the student is hitting in terms of multiple values, communication. There's also kind of like a detail orientedness that's coming through in the marketing and membership team with the peer buddy system. There's leadership and initiative coming through there. So I think in terms of like our admission nutrients, this essay is really strategically hitting a lot of those beats. And so I think that is definitely a net positive for this particular space, really leadership initiative oriented
Yeah.
examples that really drill that home.
Yeah, I agree. Someone's asking, would it be repetitive to use violin again? I think it would. Yeah. So, what inspires you? Pushing through the I wish I was dead moment in the middle of a run. Although I'm being passed on all sides by strollers and dog walkers, I feel joy by moving my body up. Moving my body and showing up day after day. I love this because it's specific. It shows me a particular value and it's funny. Like I when I look for in short answers is like, do I learn something about you that wasn't elsewhere in the application? And is there a value that I can point to? And for me, it's like your stick-to-itiveness and your sense of humor that come through really clearly. If you could teach any college course or create an original piece of art, what would it be? Advanced charades techniques for beginners, effectively immersing elementary ESL students, explore engaging kids 4 to 12 through comprehension challenges and inspiring intrinsic motivation. I think this could work. My one critique of this is that I think this is about sort of like, broadly speaking, helping others. And as I look through, I kind of see that already through your application, like in the personal statement, the supplements. So I just wonder if there's like some other aspect that could pop here other than, sort of your work with youth, because I think that this is kind of already covered in the application. Other than a family member, who's had a significant influence on you? What's been their impact? My best friend turns gossip sessions into socio-cultural theses. Love it, nerdy language. Together, we flip the script on this feminized oral tradition, practicing anthropological skills by contextualizing behavior patterns. This is so nerdy, and I love it because it shows that intellectual curiosity. I can see you coming onto campus and having these kinds of conversations in the suite, in the lounge. It's so great. Finally, what's something about you not included anywhere else in your application? I recently learned to recite a poem, W.H. Auden's Musée des Beaux-Arts. The lines on suffering backdropping ordinary life now rattle in my brain, especially when headlines mirror its 1938 publication. So I like this one. I think that it's showing both a side of you that we don't know about, which is like love of poetry. It's also got some, historical stuff and shows that sort of awareness of like, how history can repeat itself potentially. And it's showing that sort of like that critical thinking. So I think you've got something that's going really well here. My main note for y'all as you're listening to the, can you give something that clearly shows some aspect? I think that really each of these short answers ideally is going to show something that's not included elsewhere in your application or is going to highlight something in a way that we haven't seen before. So if you are going to use, for instance, violin again, give us some aspect of it that lights something up new for us. Okay, real quick, let me tell you all about, if anybody's interested, let me just go back in my presentation real quick. Other ways to connect with us. We've got, as y'all know, tons and tons of free resources. We've got more webinars. We don't have a ton more webinars coming up this year. We might have one or two. But we've got, some of the resources that we've linked already in the chat. We've got live and on-demand courses. If you're like not a senior and you're a sophomore or junior, each year, each summer, we do these live courses where you can kind of walk through writing your personal statement and supplemental essays. And if you're interested in a pay what you can spot, we've got that. So if you're an international student or you're going to be applying next year, we'd love to engage with you. We try to make it so there's no financial barrier to joining. And we do them like this. You can get lots of questions answered and, write them with a cohort of other students who are motivated in writing them. We also do one-on-one essay coaching. We do one-on-one college counseling if you're like, 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. We've got an awesome program called Matchlighters, which is like pairs you with a counselor for one-on-one support. And we've got something called Complete App Review. So a quick word on Complete App Review. Basically, the thing that you just saw, what Tom and I did, that's what we do. Well, my coaches do it. And they go through and do a really thorough line by line. Okay, here's what we think could be tweaked. Here's where I think we should rewrite. Here's an essay that's working. Why? And we do it super thorough, basically, like again, line by line, spend more than an hour on it. And you submit basically your personal statement, activities list, additional info, and then any of the supplements for one of your schools. And Tom oversees that process with our coaches. So yeah, basically you upload your application. It usually takes a couple days. We get back to you and you'll have lots of cool ideas for upleveling in lots of different ways. If you're interested in this, we've got a little special offer if you use CAR 100, and we'll put this link to the complete app review in the chat. Happy to offer that to y'all if you're interested. Separate from that, I know we're like 6 weeks away here from regular decision deadlines for most of you, but if you're interested in getting involved with us for one-on-one support in a more comprehensive way, so maybe you're like, I don't want to look at my whole application, or I want to feel like I want to do it in a different way. We're happy to help support in that way. We use my process, which we developed over the last 20 years, pair you with an awesome coach based on what you're interested in, based on the schools that you're applying to. We'll help you create a plan for like getting things done. And the idea, the hope is that you've got some awesome applications, obviously, that show you off in some amazing ways that are going to help you stand out, but that you're also learning stuff about yourself and about how you work in ways that are going to transfer beyond just this work. So we do usually at this stage of the game, we basically take a look at what you have so far, and then we assign brainstorming exercises based on sort of where we feel like is going to be the most, where we're going to get the most juice. If you're starting with this like 6 months ago, we do a full brainstorming process, but usually here it's like, okay, we assign these exercises based on what we feel like you need. And then we do some planning and going, okay, which parts do you want to go into which parts of the application? And then we just dive in and we do as many sessions as needed, basically, to get in on the personal statement and working with you on whatever supplemental essays that you need to work on according to which package you sign up for. Yeah, we've got lots of resources. A lot of these have been, tweaked over years and years. So in terms of what we're doing in the sessions, a lot of it is like picking the right experiences. And by right experiences, I mean the experiences that are going to show skills, qualities, values, and interests, and helping you to maybe see things that you didn't see in terms of the potential for certain experiences. So these are those, like I mentioned, in that last essay, for instance, I was like, I think that there's an Insight 2.0 here. So beyond what you did with the orchestral group, like, could you reveal something that isn't obvious so that it stands out from anybody else who might be organizing a music group, and finding those so what moments sometimes is what takes time. If you're interested in this, we've got 350 off on any of our essay and application coaching packages. We'll put a link in the chat right now. Thanks, Ray. That'll help you like schedule a free call with one of our amazing program advisors and just say 10 ways, because that'll let them know that it was this webinar to get that. If you're a low-income student and you would like one-on-one support, we've got something called our Matchlighter Scholars Program. We've got coaches, a few counselors left standing by. You can apply. We'll put that link in the chat as well. And you basically get paired with a counselor for 10 hours of one-on-one support. And usually that means like we're jamming at this point of the year with 6 weeks left. So if you're a counselor also separately and you're interested in volunteering, we'd love to pair you with a student. So, all right, Q&A time. We got a few minutes here. So, yeah, if you're interested, let's see. Let's just jump into the chat. Tom, is there anything that you're noticing in the chat? Are there any themes or anything that you feel like it was kind of hard to like type out, but it would be easier to say aloud that
Yeah, I think a few themes is kind of coming up is like one is about does it really make all that much of a difference if you're mentioning specific professors, programs, etc. for each school? Because some people are like, oh, I feel like everyone does that, so how can I really stand out? Um, and and then there's other students who are kind of saying something like, especially when you were sharing the why Yale response, like, a lot of schools that I'm looking at do have similar opportunities, so I'm having a hard time finding these more individual things. So those are, I'd say, the biggest themes question wise. And for the individual theme piece, one of my pieces of advice that I left as a written comment is a lot of schools have actual. Also, someone mentioned like sometimes I think the courses that I'm teaching are on the syllabus are like outdated, or maybe the professor's not teaching them. That's a great question. And colleges do notoriously have a lot of like outdated materials. So that is true that you're sifting through that. One thing I think can really help you is trying to connect with current students who are in the departments that you are interested in. A lot of colleges have like meet our student interns or tour guides options where you can email students, chat with them, have that more qualitative face-to-face conversation. So that way, from actual students who are on campus right now, who are professors actively teaching, you can ask them, tell me about your experience in the major, what have been some highlights and things that you think really stand out about your experience. That way you at least have a little more of that vetted interpersonal kind of connection. And another area too is just sometimes digging deeper, you'll find some of these nuggets. Like a student that I'm working with right now for Georgia Tech, he found out that they align their kind of like climate pledge, campus. Here's how we're going to try to be a more sustainable campus. They adhere to the UN sustainable guidelines, which is also the ones that influence his robotics competition. So he's like, I know these really well. Like these are like actually very embedded into my work that I do day in and day out for competition. So he actually kind of mentioned that he's like, oh, I'm glad that like basically we're values aligned. We both have been guided by these principles, and I do it here at robotics, and I'm looking forward to continue doing this at an institution that prioritizes this value, sustainability. So that's just one small example, I think, of how to make that a little more distinctive.
I love that. Sherry's asking, when do you expect this recording to be posted? Tomorrow. If you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, smash that like button and you'll get a notification if you turn on notifications tomorrow when it's posted. Someone was asking about how do you like reuse these essays? It sounds like, hold on. Let me just stop sharing my screen for a second. It sounds like we're saying two things. It sounds like you guys are saying, you guys didn't say it this way, I'm saying it this way. Like reuse these essays, but then also like make them particular to the school. Like what's the deal there? Let me give you an example. So this student says they were asking about Stanford, for instance. So Stanford has this question: what aspects of your life experiences, interests, and character would help you make a distinctive contribution as an undergrad to Stanford? Well, there are two parts of it. Part one, what aspects of your life experiences, interests, and character? So that's first, you're going to need to share something about your life experiences, interests, and character. And that's the piece, by the way, that's going to probably be similar from essay to essay. Okay. And then you're going to write the second part of it about how you're going to make distinctive contributions on the campus of the school, whether it's Stanford or Fordham or whatever the school is. So here, there's a little guide in our Stanford guide, which you can find just by Googling Stanford College Essay Guide. But check this out. I embody both a young Muslim woman passionate about civil liberty and a global citizen whose identity transcends her nationality. After witnessing migrant workers in the Middle East left at sunrise in desert mountains with only a broom and a single meal to last the day, I found my calling as an advocate. Love that mention of that identity. At Fordham or at Stanford or at Michigan or whatever school's asking for this, I want to pursue these human rights questions in courses like, and you'll probably just be switching out the courses here. Okay. Probably there's a course that's similar to this, and even your reasons might be similar because it could be that another course, the thing that you want to learn in it is also available at another school. Now, wait, Ethan, but didn't you say you're supposed to find courses? Yes, there's a weird paradox here where you might find a course that's like Development and globalization by Professor Durkin, that's offered nowhere else. That is specific to Fordham. And then you go to Stanford's website and you're like, ooh, there's this other course where I can delve into discussions about reproductive rights and genocide prevention and prison reform. It's not called development and globalization, but by getting really specific with what I wanted to learn, I was able to go shopping on the other school's website for the specific thing that I can put in here. So that's probably what you're switching out. Someone's asking, why is Match Letters only available for US residents? What of us internationals? I know it's one of the, I was talking about this with somebody today. Here's why. The complexities of international students applying to the US. And by the way, check out the recent webinar with Joan Liu on this. And also, there's a version of the podcast that's coming out tomorrow, I think next week. That's the same content. Gets into some of the complexities of why it can be tougher for counselors, because we don't have a ton of counselors who have experience working with international students. So if you're a counselor who's got experience working with international students, particularly international students who are full need, which is to say they're looking for scholarships, please, we'd love for you to volunteer for Match Letters because we could open up. But we just don't have as many counselors who have experience. But if you're interested, got a ton of resources for you for international students. I've put it in the chat. Tom, maybe we'll do like one more question each here and then we'll call it. Is there one that you feel like is one that folks would benefit from if we did it sort of verbally here?
I have one that just came in. I realize a lot of essays sound fun, creative, using a lot of analogies. Students have an epiphany after a specific experience. I've been reflecting deeply and pondering, but I don't seem to have a creative experience. I will say, I think that there is a unfair, maybe self-imposed pressure to be like super creative and use analogies in every essay, in your application. First of all, you can put together a great college application that has no analogies. That is very hypothetical. It's definitely a tactic that can work well for students in terms of artfully tying together some aspect of the human experience to your own individual values and what you do with your time. But especially with the supplemental essays, remember that word limit, right? You don't necessarily have, I'd say, a ton of space to have it be super creative, to be packing in lots of analogies. A lot of times the word limit is suggesting to you, actually, hey, with this component, unlike maybe your personal essay, where there's a little more room for that, we kind of really want you to hit the concrete points here that we're asking you to reflect on. So I'd say, dear student, if in terms of epiphany or pressure on yourself, I don't think you need to super put that pressure on yourself to have all of your essays be in that vein. It can definitely be a little more straightforward, especially on the supplemental essay side.
I usually don't address questions directly related to our coaching, but I'm going to do it because I think I was starting to type out an answer and I was like, oh, I think I just need to say this. So my son is a junior. When do you recommend starting the actual application process? And if we decide we need coaching on that, when would that start? So I'll just answer this generally, whether it's college essay guy or not. Like a lot of times people will sign up in January, February. We will give the brainstorming work. And if students want to get started on that, like in the winter months, great. We usually I think the best time to start essay writing and stuff is May, June, and be like really working intensively over the summer. That's to me the best time. Oftentimes, if students start earlier than that, they end up writing a bunch of stuff. And then when they get to summer, they're like, I think I want to write about something different. And we're like, okay. And we can do it. But it's like a lot of times that writing ends up some of it gets used, but a lot of it times they're like, oh, we're going to write new stuff. So we found that summer is the best time to do that. Some students like to start a little earlier, especially if they're going to have a really busy summer. But we love brainstorming to happen in the sort of winter, really spring, I would say, spring months, and then working in earnest over the summer. So that my goal, my hope for y'all is that you're done like with your personal statement and your early applications sorry, this is like seniors don't want to hear this, in like before the fall. Because if you're done before you go back to school, you're not having to worry as much about, okay, and I'm retaking this test and I'm, doing this new leadership role and all these other things. So as much as possible, I would say have your early application or applications done in the fall, or sorry, by the time you go back to school. Okay, one more. Would it stand out more to talk about an activity that's not related to STEM for a supplemental essay, or would making the whole application very STEM-based make you more competitive? I'm applying as a STEM major. Depends on the school. But generally speaking, if it's like Caltech, which has got like 6 different STEM essays, I would say make the STEM essays STEM focused and then do everything you can to not talk about STEM. Because if you look at what Caltech wants, they will say on their website, we're looking for an interest in the humanities. We're looking for, do you have an outlet? So I would say definitely you need to check the box and show them that you are going to be different from another engineering student or CS student. And here are the ways that you've, prepared for that major. But then they also, yes, on top of you being incredible in STEM, have other things that you're interested in and that you've done. And I would say interdisciplinariness is key. If you can show the way that you've overlapped your STEM interest with an interest in this other thing, maybe a couple times, I think that, colleges really love to see that. All right, friends, we're going to call it there and say thanks. Thanks for being here. We hope that you'll continue to take advantage of the resources. Like I said, we don't have too many webinars coming up for the rest of the year because we kind of go into hibernation mode at this time. But yeah, we've got tons of resources on the site. We hope you'll take advantage and we'll follow up via email with all the resources. Final words, Tom? Anything to say to the folks?
No, no, I just use the resources. We got you, hopefully. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, friends, and thanks, Ray, for moderating. We hope you'll have a lovely evening and a wonderful holiday season. And yeah, sending you all lots of love. Bye.